Me, 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 me. Ma. Ma. Ma.
The new show 3. I'm Joe.
I'm Alan.
And I'm Dan.
And we're back, and we're going to be answering some of your questions as usual. You can send those in by email to show@thenew.show or on Twitter @AskNewShow. And let us know if you want to remain anonymous, otherwise we might read your name out. And if you want to support creation of these episodes, go to patreon.com/AskNewShow and support us on there. Right, so the first one then. What did you want to be when you grew up?
This is tough because I wanted to be a lot of stuff when I grew up, right? Like, I feel like this changes as you grow up, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think the first thing I wanted to be was a scientist. And then I wanted to be a rock star. Then I wanted to be a stand-up comedian. Then I wanted to be a professional podcaster. And none of them have really worked out so far.
I remember standing next to my mum in around 1978. So that would have put me 6 years old, something like that. And she was standing, we're in the lounge, and she was standing doing her makeup in the mirror. And I looked up and said, "Mum, when I'm older, will I have boobs like you?" Judge for yourself. I don't think I ever had a career path ahead of me. I don't think I ever thought, spaceman, fireman, the typical things, policeman that, kids are supposed to aspire to be. I certainly know that once I discovered computers, I wanted to do something that involved computers. And that was as early as 1980 to 1983. So I was quite young, and I certainly was sure that there was some involvement with computing. Little did I know, that's basically everyone's job now, is being somewhere near a computer unless you're outside. So yeah, I didn't really have anything specific other than hand-wavy something computery, I think.
Yeah, I think the first thing I can remember wanting to be was like an inventor. I loved like Rube Goldberg machines and things like that. And I was like, ooh, I want to do something like that where I make something mechanical. And then, everything is like software now, right? Like there's still like structural engineers and that sort of thing. And robotics are a thing. But like, as far as consumer devices, like that we normally interact with, like everything's just like a glass slab, we don't really interact with things that have very many moving parts.
I don't know if it was a like fantasy job and not like the real, boring. I would like to be an accounts clerk working in accounts receivable in the office of a small to medium sized business, which is like realism. If I wanted to be something mad, then yeah, probably time traveler, spaceman, all that kind of thing. I do remember before my teens, in my early years, I do remember thinking it would be super cool to be a spaceman or time traveler or something like that always stuck in my head as being super cool things, but neither of them are particularly careers that I could have, I think, really easily gone into unless I was super driven and wanted to go down the path of going in the army or navy or whatever and train. And even then it's like 1 in a billion chance of, being a spaceman. So yeah, I think I was pretty realistic, early years that you can have these dreams, but actually you're going to be in a boring ass job somewhere probably.
I can definitely relate to you, Joe, though, with wanting to be a musician, like especially more as a teenager. That was something that, I was really involved with playing music and like did quite a few live shows and stuff. And like, that's what I thought, like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do for sure. Like I'm in a band and like we have our music and we're going to get signed and all this stuff. And like, you never account for like life to happen, and being in a band is tough. There's all of this like high emotions and stuff, especially like at that age, everybody's lives are being defined and everything, so it's one of those things where it's like just 1 in a billion, like you said, with being a spaceman, like it's popularity based thing that, so many people are not going to be able to succeed just because of the nature of the thing.
Yeah. Although my expectations kind of tempered themselves as I went along, because at first I thought I was going to be this massive rock star that was going to be world famous, playing stadiums and stuff like that. And then I got a little bit further along and thought, oh, well, maybe just, theatres or whatever. And then eventually got down to the point where I was thinking, well, I could be in one of those bands that like tours around and you make a living from it and you can just about buy a house or whatever. And then eventually I just got to the point where, I could buy some nice guitars and just play them on my own.
Oh,
yeah. I kind of feel like music is that way for me in a lot of ways too, where it's like, I'm kind of just at the point now where it's like, oh, well, I could do music on my own when I feel like it, but it's not such a huge part of my life anymore.
I do wonder what my kids are going to do, because I don't think they've got any idea. My daughter certainly doesn't. She's only just about to finish her school education and go on to college, and she's taken some generic subjects, really, nothing that, you would pin on a career. So I think it's pretty natural for people to either not know or have, in your case, like super big dreams that don't get realized. That's pretty much the natural order of things. And like I say, end up being Bob in accounts receivable for 20 years and get your carriage clock at the end of your career. I think that's pretty normal for the vast majority of people.
The community is always excited when Linux gets added as a pre-install option by computer manufacturers. Wouldn't a dual boot pre-installation option actually be more likely to encourage nervous newbies to safely try out Linux? Microsoft OEM licensing issues aside. And this is from Paddy.
Who is the target of this? Like, someone who's buying a computer is buying a computer to achieve a task. Like, they've got stuff they want to get done, whether it's writing documents, doing schoolwork, video editing, or just a basic surf the internet, shitbox laptop. Whatever it is, people have got goals that they want to achieve. And I don't feel the operating system is a factor for most people. It's just they look at the specs of the machine and the price is the main thing. Has it got enough memory to run all the crap that I want to run? And can I afford it? Has it got a big enough screen? Maybe if they've had one or two computers before, then other factors will be there, like, oh, I had a computer with a shit keyboard once, so I want one that's got a good keyboard. Or a computer I had previously had a crappy webcam. I want one with a good webcam, or I want one with good speakers. These are all factors people use when choosing a computer. And for the most part, I don't think the operating system is a factor. So having it as a dual boot option doesn't feel like an advantage to the potential customer.
Yeah, I think I would tend to agree with that. And it feels like if we think about like the kinds, like the best experiment we have for this right now is probably like different Android ROMs, right? Like there's devices out there and they all have their little custom implementations of Android, and you don't really hear normal people talking about like, oh, well, I use the Samsung ROM on, whatever hardware, and like they just buy the device and they know that like this one comes with Bixby and this one has the Google Assistant, and it's kind of, I don't think regular people even really grok like the concept of the operating system being a separate thing from the device itself.
Right.
I don't think that this question is aimed at normal people, like the kind of people who just go and pick the one that looks the best and just they don't even know about specs or whatever. I don't think that this is what he had in mind when asking this. I suspect he's thinking more of the people who would buy an XPS 13, Sputnik or whatever with Linux. The kind of people who would install Linux and would maybe set up a dual boot because there is some things that they need in Windows. And maybe it would encourage more of those people to try it out, rather than your sort of average normals or whatever. This is people who know about Linux, are aware of it, want to try it out, but they don't want to only have Linux on their machine.
I don't know. I think one of the problems with all of this, trying to pander to a particular demographic of users, is they're very hypothetical demographics. They're not real people. They're people that, in the mind of someone who is enthusiastic about a technology and wants people to use that technology, conjures up this image of, if only we did this thing, this swathe of users will be converted. And I think it's a mistake to go down that path, because there are plenty of people who are quite happily buying, like you said, XPS 13s, or buying old laptops and installing Linux on them because they know it's reliable. There's a thriving community of people who are buying Linux machines and installing Linux on them. Otherwise, these companies who sell Linux laptops and desktops wouldn't survive if there weren't already people doing it. I think what they're talking about is converting more people over. And I honestly don't think dual booting is the way to do it. The problem with dual booting is there is this massive hurdle of switching OS. And I know some people will say, well, it doesn't take long to reboot. My system boots in seconds and I can switch between them. Windows actually makes it actively hard to reboot into another operating system. If you choose restart, it will restart back into Windows straight away. You have to jump through a few additional hoops, hold down special keys or shut down and boot from another media, or there are things that make it harder, and it just makes more friction. That means that whole process of rebooting into another OS isn't really easily viable. And I think a VM is way easier, or just boot from a live environment off a USB stick. Those are way better ways to introduce a person to Linux, because in the event of the VM being screwed up or them not liking it, they just throw it away. And in the event of a USB stick not working out right, or they don't like it, they just wipe it and put something else on there. The dual boot experience is pretty shitty, and it's a massive commitment to dedicate a huge chunk of your disk space that's actually pretty painful to get back again.
I don't know what dual booting experience you have had, but that's not at all for me. Machines where I have Windows 10 and Ubuntu, you just reboot and it reboots fine.
Are they on two separate disks?
No.
They're both on the same disk.
Yeah.
And interesting. So if you install Windows and then install Linux, then you'll probably get grub.
Yep.
And at the grub menu, you can choose. My laptop has two different physical disks, and I've got Windows on one and Linux on the other. And so it's a bit more problematic. But I still, the rebooting situation aside, and the friction that I feel from rebooting aside, there's also the whole, you have to throw away your entire session and reboot into another operating system. And I still feel that is friction. Whereas you could boot a VM up and you can put it to sleep and wake it up and put it to sleep and wake it up, and it's all still there while the host OS is still there as well. So a VM is a way more viable option. Or something like, WSL for developers. All these things are more viable than reboot.
Or I think even cheaper hardware, like something like the Pinebook Pro could be someone's introduction to desktop Linux, where they could just have two devices, Like that's probably more realistic for like a regular person's mindset, is like, I'm using this computer, now I'm going to go use the other computer and we'll see which computer I use more.
The other thing that was alluded to in the question was Microsoft OEM licensing issues aside. That is a big issue. And I don't know if it still is, because I don't know the details of the Microsoft OEM license, but it certainly used to be the case that there was limitations on what you could ship with a machine if it has a Windows key. And it was crucial that if you had a Windows key, the only thing that button can do is operate the start menu. And a certain top tier laptop vendor had Microsoft lawyers after them, because they shipped with an operating system that shall not be named, where when you press the Windows key, something other than the Windows start menu appears. And so at that time, Microsoft were particularly litigious about, if you ship Windows and it has a Windows key on the keyboard, the only function that button can do is open the start menu. They would go after you if you had any other software on there, including Linux, which did anything other than open the Windows start menu. So yeah, there are legal restrictions in what you can do there too. Certainly were, don't know if there still are.
It's kind of interesting when you get into like what's required for a computer to be certified to, like you said, to be able to have the Windows logo on there. And there's some weird stuff like people ask why we can't remap the Super P shortcut for changing display modes. And it's because laptops actually have it hard-coded in firmware. It's a different key code. Like that's not part of the operating system at all. And that's because of the Microsoft Windows certification.
So I think all of these things put together make dual booting just a non-starter for companies shipping devices targeting a super niche audience of will I, won't I Linux users. I think all the other options we've offered are way better than dual boot.
What chore or job at home do you postpone, yet when you complete it, it's satisfying?
All of them, but I feel like the top one has to be anything where I have to interact with the government. If it's, I got to like renew my driver's license or get a new parking permit or like anything the government wants me to do, I'm always like, oh God, and what's the due date for this? And then like once I get it done, then I'm like, oh good, it's gone.
Yeah, I was going to start with, where do I start? Every job basically. But then I thought actually the ones that are actually satisfying. I don't feel satisfied after doing any of that government paperwork at all. I mean, I just put it off. I don't feel satisfied afterwards. But the one that I do is mowing the lawn, cutting the grass when it's really long and jungle-like. I put it off, and the grass gets so long that the lawnmower, chugs on the grass, and it gets like really painful to cut, especially if it's damp. I hate doing that job. I hate cutting the grass. But the good news is I've punched out 2 kids. And so now they do it, for a little bit of pocket money. And they even argue over who's going to do it. So, I don't have that one anymore. So I've offloaded that to my offspring. And when they move out, I'll probably have to go back to doing it myself, or I'll just concrete over the garden and not have to do it ever again.
Okay, you're right. I confused relief for satisfaction. So I think that I'm going to change mine to dusting, because that's one where it just kind of, I'll dust when I get around to, and then when you do, it's like, everything's so clean.
Mine's somewhat related to that. It's tidying my desk, or my desk zone, as it's called, because it's such a just terrible, terrible mess. I've got like 2 tables, and very occasionally I'll tidy it and then it looks really nice and it's all organized, and then I just dump shit all over it and it just becomes totally unusable. And I will find myself sitting at the kitchen table doing something and get complained at, why aren't you doing it on your desk? Oh, there's too much shit in it. Well, tidy it then. And I just put it off. And when I do it, I do feel very satisfied, but it's only a temporary satisfaction because it just within a week is just covered in shit again.
Yeah, I get satisfied when I clean my desk. I did it recently in order to fit a gigantic keyboard on it. And now that dominates my desk and there's no room for anything else, which is kind of good in a way. I feel super envious when people post photos of their workstation environment and there's literally just a wireless keyboard, a wireless mouse, a couple of speakers and a glorious monitor and like nothing else on the desk. Maybe a cup of coffee perfectly mounted on a round coaster, like it's perfectly centrally mounted. And so, they've set that up for the photo, obviously, but I feel super jealous of these people who are able to sustain a tidy desk like that. I just can't do it. There's shit everywhere on my desk, always. And while we're recording the podcast, I'm always sitting here fiddling with something. So there's probably background noise of me fiddling with a USB key, a Sharpie pen, my wedding ring, the keys on my keyboard. I pull one of the keys off my keyboard and sit and fuck about with it. There's always something I'm dicking about with on my desk. And yeah, I would love to be able to have a completely clear desk and just get rid of everything, but I just can't do it.
Yeah, that's just for the gram, man. My desk plant died after like a week after I took my like battle station photo. And I got fucking papers everywhere.
Paper is the one thing that I don't have on this desk, because I have 2 desks, one in my studio office cupboard, and I don't think I've got any paper. Oh no, I've got a pad, but I haven't got papers everywhere. But I'm looking at it now, it is disgraceful. But she never comes in here, so it doesn't matter. I can just leave it a complete fucking mess.
It's all this shit from the government, man. All these fucking licenses and renewals and taxes and whatever the hell else they want. Leave me alone, government.
The only paper on my desk are Post-it notes. There's 2 Post-it notes. One, which is a prediction I made at the start of the year, which I'm keeping handy just in case it gets broken at any time. But I'm pretty keen that that one stays. And the other one is I made a note of a nickname for someone that you told me, Joe. So I wrote it down so I don't forget, because it makes me chuckle every time I see it. And so that amuses me. Those are the only 2 pieces of paper on my desk. And I have to be careful when I take photos of my desk. Sometimes I do for bug reports. that Post-it note isn't in the photo. Everyone's going to go through all my bug reports now and look for any photos of my desk and see if that Post-it note is there. I think I'm pretty safe. I have moved it to the side now, so it's not front and center. But yeah, that's the only paperwork on my desk.
You don't have all your little affirmations up? You're doing great.
No.
What are you going to call this show when it's no longer new? And this is from Nassif.
Well, it's always new, isn't it? There's a new episode every 2 weeks, which you'll find at thenew.show.
What is the main difference for you in having a one-on-one remote video call with a friend versus hanging out in real life?
You can't ask them to pull your finger when you're on a video call.
You can ask them to virtually pull it, but yeah, I suppose that's not the same, is it? Yeah.
They don't get the effect either. Like they don't either hear it or smell it, probably. So yeah. It's a significant difference, I think.
The biggest thing is where your eyes are focused. Like when I hang out with my friends, I don't sit there like staring at their faces the entire time we hang out.
No, you're looking at your phone, obviously.
Well, no, not at your fucking phone, but like, you know, like if you're out with friends, then you're doing something. If you're like at the pub, you know, maybe you're playing darts or just like people watching or you're having a pint or whatever you're doing, you know, you're doing something other than just like staring at each other's faces. You're playing cards. I don't know, anything. But it just seems like you're on a video call and like, it's like, all right, I'm looking at you, talking to you the whole time. And it doesn't feel as low pressure, I guess, when you're hanging out with someone and it's like, you know, we're interacting, but we're not like required to be staring at each other.
There's also zero lag when you're in the same room as someone. And so conversations flow a lot better when you're in the same room, and talking over each other while you're in the same room isn't a problem. But when there's computers determining the volume at which each participant is going to be and who can hear it and whether it's a latent connection or not, really adversely affects the flow of the conversation. You know, basically every podcaster in the world knows this. But in a pub, when you're sat around chatting, the flow of conversation is much better and much smoother and much more relaxed. Whereas it's very stilted when you're having a video chat and you got to wait for someone else to finish speaking, or if someone cuts in or zones out a little bit, it's just a bit awkward. I find it really quite painful having those conversations with you every 2 weeks.
Yeah, when I suddenly start getting Telegram messages and just drift off for a bit. For me, I don't have an answer because I haven't done it yet. I haven't resorted to it. I had a long phone call yesterday with a friend who I haven't seen for ages, but it was a phone call. It wasn't a video thing. I do have a webcam, but it's really terrible and I don't like plugging it in. I don't like video generally. So for me, I've always been more of a phone type person, and whether that is an actual phone call or VoIP or whatever, I just video, I don't know why. I think probably for the reason that you said, Dan, it's just a bit weird to be staring at each other, and I would just end up taking the focus away from that window and wouldn't be looking at them properly, and then they'd realize, and it just seems weird to me. I just don't have any desire to have video calls with anyone ever, really.
It's also not helpful if some of your friends are technical fucking idiots and can't get online in any way. I had a video catch up with some of my friends, like people I've known for 30 years, and a couple of them work in IT and a couple of them don't. But you would think they can all operate a web browser, but turns out no. One of them, we spent half an hour trying to get this guy into a video chat, and because someone had decided it was one particular platform, doesn't matter which one it was, but there's always someone who can't get in, or, oh, I can't hear anyone, or my camera's not working. And so you spend all the time discussing why Joe can't get into the meeting, which you never have in a pub. I mean, you might in a pub where someone's got the wrong footwear on or has aggravated a bouncer and can't get into the pub. But typically you all manage to get in the pub and have a chat. Whereas, you sit around discussing someone's inability to operate a web browser, which is a shitty way to have a conversation with your friends. You just want to get on and have a chat and shoot the shit. But yeah, technical stuff gets in the way.
I was going to say, this sounds like trying to get into a nightclub.
Yeah, there is a bit of that. Yeah.
You spend the entire evening like, where the hell is Alan?
Or in my case, I get lost and can't find the pub, or go to the wrong pub with the same name or something.
So yes, there are certainly real world analogies for all these technical fuck ups. Yes, I grant you that. But yeah, okay.
Are we living in a simulation?
So this is one of those ones where I heard the argument for this and I went, all right. And the argument goes like, as time progresses, which is theoretically infinite, so does technology for reproducing simulations, right? Like if you just look at video games and how technology progresses every year. So as time goes on, it's almost certainly possible that we will eventually get to a point where it is completely possible to have a simulation that is indistinguishable from reality. And after that point, the likelihood of us being part of a simulation starts to grow and grow and grow with time. So it kind of seems like, all right, assuming that you're not saying, are we in a simulation right now? But like in some point in time, could we be in a simulation? Could that point in time be right now? Oh, all right. I don't know. Maybe.
How would you know? Like, is there any way you could possibly break out of the simulation, or are we expecting that the simulator in the future, assuming we are sat now in a simulation that's happening in the future, is that computing power so perfect that there are no glitches? Or are, the Matrix style Black Cat, is that a glitch that's a manifestation of the simulation? Is that just, the cinematographer's way of dealing with the fact that we're in a simulation? How do you know?
What is real? What you can feel, what you can taste, what you can touch.
What about the fact that we cannot at the moment, and I'll say we, I mean scientists who are dead clever but humanity cannot understand and cannot kind of put together what we understand in the macro world, like Newtonian and Einstein mechanics, relativity and all that, with the micro, the tiny quantum mechanical world. Those two just do not align. And seemingly, it makes no sense, because if you look at relativity, that makes perfect sense, and any experiments bear it out. Similarly with quantum mechanics, and the two are just incompatible with each other. Could that be the case, that they genuinely are incompatible, and that is a sign that we're in a simulation, or more likely that we just don't understand it yet?
It's definitely interesting to think like that could be an indication that like the things that we typically interact with are just an approximation of some kind, or, some kind of like statistical, it's a rounding error kind of thing. When you look at like, video game technologies and how they're like, okay, well, we have an idea of how things are all supposed to be, but we really don't need to compute all that. We just need to do what you're actually interacting with. That's kind of an interesting direction.
I don't know. It just seems ridiculously complicated. Like, who would bother simulating the human brain and then simulating something going wrong inside that human brain such that or in that body, such that a blood clot causes that particular brain to go wrong. And then external parties are able to cut open that head and suck out that blood clot in order to fix that brain. Who would go as far as to simulate all of that over and above just people walking around? Like, I think about something like a video game is the easy analogy that we make. And you look at the real basic rudimentary bullshit games that we have now where, something is passable for looking like a human and the thing that they pick up is passable for looking like a knife and a gun and a car. But if you look a little bit deeper, you put your head through the bonnet, you realize, well, the skin has only been covered on the outside and inside it's all completely hollow, right? Who would go that far down to that much detail to simulate this stuff? It just feels like nobody would bother. I can't imagine anyone would attempt to do this.
I guess if you're like a research scientist in the future, right? And like your goal is to find a cure for, coronavirus. And, so you run all these simulations and maybe that's what you need. You need to find out, how does it interact with this person that has this disease or that thing or this social situation? And how does the virus spread from this person to that person? And like, that's where you need like a real simulation to figure out like, all the little details.
To some degree, yes, I can get that. But I'm not convinced that they needed to simulate the spiders in my garage in order to do that, right? But they did. If this is a simulation, someone did indeed simulate the spiders in my garage. The dead ones in a drawer that I haven't opened for 10 years. And I open it and there's a dead spider in there. That's simulated. Why? Why would you bother? How is that influencing the net result of your machine, this automata that you've created? What was the point of adding that spider in the drawer?
It's a butterfly effect, man. Everything's important.
Well, it's a spider, not a butterfly, but okay.
It's a spider effect, man.
I think you've just disproved it. Dead spider theory.